You hear that? The sound of bold ideas.
Welcome to the UX Rotterdam Podcast. We are recording at RawCC. My name is Nauko Leong. I'm the co-founder of UX Rotterdam. And in this podcast, I will talk with designers, leaders, and other creative thinkers who are shaping how design technology and human experiences are evolving, especially in times of rapid change. In this episode, I'm joined by Henk Haaima. Henk is creative director of Total Design. He's an old colleague of mine, and I'm very proud to have him today. Henk,
thanks for having me.
What is your connection to Rotterdam?
Well, I moved to Rotterdam 15 years ago, and I used to live in Amsterdam. But you know, I'm a creative, so I'm not really interested in establishment cities, and I consider Amsterdam as an establishment city. And to be honest, I mean, look at the view from this studio. It's a beautiful city, Rotterdam, and what I like about Rotterdam is that it's really reinventing itself continuously. So it's, I think, the most interesting city for creatives in the Netherlands. Maybe Eindhoven is also another city that is interesting for creatives, but it's very important to reject cities that are too much like establishment.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. But since you also live in Rotterdam, can you mention a couple of spots you are visiting quite often, or maybe some tips for our listeners?
To be honest, my favorite part of Rotterdam is Rijnhaven, Maashaven. Also the part of Rotterdam where I live, close to Kop van Zuid. I live at the Feyenoordkade. Well, that sounds really like Rotterdam. But there's a lot of nice architecture there. But also in this neighborhood, I just walked to this studio and I saw the Little C, I think that is the name of the building. That is all super interesting. Not to mention, of course, what Rem Koolhaas did here in Rotterdam with the Rotterdam, the vertical city. So it's all very exciting. So it's not, I'm not mentioning like the nice vintage stores or the cafes, but more the architectural statements here.
Talking about architecture, I think that has a lot of influence also in your work, right?
Yeah, what I like about architecture is that, architects, they're really defining the dot on the horizon. That's what I like. So they're really very much focused on what could happen in the future. I think Rem Koolhaas is an example of that. But also they are, it's utilitarian design. So it's very much about function. And I think that relates a lot to user experience design and design in general. But what I like is the bold statements. So there's a lot of ideology behind the design of the building.
And how do you see that back in the work you delivered in all these years?
I always try to reinvent the user interface. And I don't know if I'm very successful with this, but at least I try to reinvent it. So you can, as a UX designer, you can, of course, recycle all these patterns and all these components that already exist in design systems. That's not so interesting. You need to reinvent it. So you need to create like a starting point. And from there, you decide what you need or what you don't need. And it's also that you need a very clear point of view about aesthetics. So what is your point of view when it comes to the aesthetical part of the website or digital product? Mm-hmm. Because people, I'm a promoter of utilitarian design, functional design, but at the same time, that cannot live without aesthetics, because people interact with the things that we design. And that
what is the definition of aesthetics for you? I mean, it can be very subjective, I think. Can you explain a little bit how you look at aesthetics? What
Yeah, that's an
what does it
interesting
mean for you?
question because I think that systems, I consider systems also as part of aesthetics. For example, grid-based design. And so we are currently, of course, in the era of agentic AI. It's all about algorithms. So I think it's really interesting as a creative director or as a designer, how do I transfer my knowledge, all the knowledge I build up in the years, how can I transfer that into a machine? That means that I try to catch all these creative ideas, all these crazy ideas into algorithms. So you cannot really separate aesthetics from systems. But that's also a personal point of view that I have. I currently work as a creative director at Total Design. Total Design was founded in the 60s, the early 60s, by, among others, Wim Krauwel. Wim Krauwel was one of the godfathers of Dutch design, and yeah, his nickname was Mr. Gridnik. So he invented grids as a foundation for design, and he also created some world-famous typefaces. New Alphabet, also Gridnik is the name of one of his typefaces. So he was really inspired by technology, but also his aesthetics is very utilitarian, very rational, and system-based. Mm-hmm. But that's my definition of aesthetics. Yeah, well, and I'm aware that it is...
you can explain creativity in many different ways, and I think this is an interesting perspective. But one of the questions you are dealing with, I think, the last couple of years is what happens to user experience when the user is no longer human?
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about what you mean with this question?
I was just checking my Instagram account before this interview, and I'm following this artificial personality, Lil Maquela is her name. This is like an LA-based fictional personality. And it's interesting, she is an AI-generated personality, but somehow she feels like a real person. So I don't really see, I cannot really divide like a machine or a human. So it's actually like, I don't like to have this debates about a machine or algorithms and what happened with the human part. I think it's a bit obsolete to discuss these kind of topics in this way.
But what is the influence on it if you look at the role of the designer? Does it change the way we are dealing with our creative process?
Oh yes, for sure, because in the past or currently we are still, as designers, creating assets like websites or a landing page, a banner, a report, brochure, etc., icon families, etc., and so on. What we are currently try to establish in design is that we are not longer creating these assets, but the machines that can create these assets. And that's very interesting. It's super challenging. This cannot happen from one day to the other. But we are in the middle of this process now to create the machines that will generate the assets. Mm-hmm.
But if you look at traditional output, like a website, for instance, and let's have a little bit a look into the future. How does a website look like in a couple of years?
I think it will most probably disappear, because what is currently happening that we delegate the visiting or the information seeking process is being delegated by us. We are all using agents, assistants, LLMs to visit these websites on our behalf. So that's where the user interface becomes a bit like redundant. And of course, this is like a bold statement. It's also a projection. I expect this to happen, let's say, within 4 or 5 years. But it's already happening. Because I had a personal experience earlier this year. We were traveling in China. And for some reason, we were navigating China with our LLMs, with Perplexity, with ChatGPT, with DeepSeek. And after 2 weeks, we noticed that we were not visiting websites anymore. And at that point, I decided to realize that we are in a revolution.
But what happens with the experience of you as a user? What happens to, we talked about aesthetics, let's say the graphic side of what we as designers deliver. Is that also going to disappear?
No, I don't think so. I'm a big promoter of the graphical user interface because for the simple reason that people don't like to read. And now it's all these LLMs are very much text-based, which is fine because it's more like it's a conversational UI, so that feels like a natural UI. But we cannot live without graphical UI because that simplifies the experience. So what you see is that there's, for example, just one example, a collaboration between Shopify, the e-commerce platform, and ChatGPT. So these articles, for example, pop up as components within your large language model. So that already, it's also called MCP UI, model protocol context UI. So this already is an indication that the visual components will not disappear. But what will disappear is all these funny UI elements that we don't need. You have these exotic UI elements like snack bars, chips, breadcrumbs, progress indicators, step indicators. These elements become redundant. So these elements will disappear because they are really part of the, I call it like the obstacle course that we are currently designing. If you book a flight, there are like 6 or 7 screens, and you have to process and to fill in out all these forms, make a lot of decisions. And now, soon we will delegate that. So all these obstacle courses, these flows, with all these exotic UI elements, that's what will disappear.
And it's part of the evolution.
Yeah. But what will not disappear is the graphical user interface, in the sense that we still want to see the product. And even if you buy, if you select a seat on a plane, you want a little bit to have a feeling about. That's why we are using visiting Seat Guru, for example, to get a notion of the convenience of the seat that you are selecting. So.
And how about trust? You can say that ChatGPT will work based on the input of still real human interaction. Do you trust all your AI tools enough to
No.
say it's the truth?
No. There's a hallucination, of course. Personally, I have like 7 or 8 LLMs, and I use all these LLMs simultaneously for my work for this simple reason that you cannot just rely on one LLM. That's what most people do. They're only using ChatGPT. I don't understand why. So you need to use more LLMs, and you need to be aware. I'm not so concerned about the trust issue because I'm still directing the output. So I have a very clear idea as a designer or as a creative director. So I define my prompt very carefully. So it's very precise. And that makes the output also quite reliable or accurate, at least.
Yeah, okay. I can imagine when it comes to facts and figures. But what about open questions? I know people who are using ChatGPT as a sort of friend to ask opinions, to ask tips and advise them.
Never a good idea. Never a good idea. It's even not a good idea to have. You need to be very precise. Otherwise, you are really like delegating it, but in the wrong way, as a very lazy person.
But so what is our role as designers, as design strategists? How can we influence that in a way that it becomes more human?
I think it's interesting that when talking about agentic AI, it's always about speed and that we are already too late, and that's not good, because we still have like 4 or 5 years until we reach this state of super intelligence. Well, let's call this the Agentic AI 1.0 version. So we are still like taking the first steps, but we have time to redefine who we are as a brand. I mean, at least that's what I try to do with my colleagues, that we introduced even a methodology called essentiality, just to take your time to redefine who you are, because you need to have a very clear point of view if you want to survive as a brand within the era of the algorithm. Otherwise, it's the other way around, and that's a very bad idea. And then at that point, you need a human compass, so to say.
So you can say that also working with clients, building these brands, they need to be educated.
They need to be educated, and but to be honest, all our clients are in a digital transformation, and now they are in AI transformation. But they all come to the same conclusion: you can basically do anything you like or anything you want, and that's very distracting. So you need to have have a human compass. And that's where, branding is, of course, about defining your personality and your point of view. And that's one of the requirements in the era of the algorithm to be successful. Because in the end, it's all about consumers, about humans. They're still involved.
But I think one of the responsibilities of your role as being a creative director is to recognize the matter of quality. Yeah. But what is your tool for that? I mean, it cannot just be experience and knowledge, right? How do you explain why this project has more quality and value than the other one?
That relates to what I called essentiality. I mean, you start with defining your brand and your brand personality, but it also relates to 2 simple words. That is trajectory, so that is a strategic vision, and taste. That sounds maybe a bit weird, but I'm responsible for curation in the sense of taste and strategic vision, trajectory. So, of course, it's about implementing tools, AI tools for clients. It's about designing multiple agent frameworks for clients. But in the end, it's always about defining direction. And that relates, but this is also a very personal opinion, to the creative director or to the designer or to a CEO of a company. So we are still, and that's very important to emphasize, we are still in the lead. AI is an enhancement. And to be honest, I'm so enthusiastic about agentic AI because it's the first time in the history of automation that we can use it as an enhancement. So that's at least how I feel. It makes my work better as a creative.
That sounds like a very interesting conclusion. I want to know more about that, but let's go back to the relationship with your clients. Because I can imagine in this world where a lot of things are changing, because you are very close with your clients, how do you gain their trust? How do you keep their trusted advisor?
The only responsibility I have in my job is that I provide clients or projects or teams with direction. And that aesthetics is involved, so taste is involved, but also that it's like the strategic direction that fits with the needs of the client and the end users, the consumers or employees within an organization. That's where you build trust. So a creative director is, or a strategic director is a curator.
But do you think the relationship also changes because of all these technology runs? Do you think that clients look different at their collaboration with you?
Yeah, I think maybe they expect that in the future they can do a lot with all these agents and that they no longer need a creative director. That could be. I'm not sure about it, but that could be. But I think this whole collaboration will change because we are in an agentic era now, so there are agents, LLMs, but also creative tools, AI tools involved. So it's not like a client agency collaboration. That's the traditional collaborations you have. But now we are also, they're like agents in between. And the interesting thing is these agents are also collaborating with each other independently from us. Well, not independently, but more or less. And there are, of course, tools involved. We are working with Figma, with Binder, Frontify, and also with Flora, which is an AI tool environment for creatives. So how do we design this collaboration or redesign or reinvent this collaboration between agencies and our clients? Yeah, that's one of the challenges. And we are currently, it's basically on my laptop now. And the funny thing is that there's not a pattern for that yet. So I don't know yet. I have some sketches here, so we are inventing it, but it's pioneering. We are taking the first steps into this new world, but for sure, if we don't reinvent this collaboration with our client now, then we are lost within 2 or 3 years. So it's the only way to go.
How do you look at these developments? Are you afraid? Or does it make you excited?
It makes me excited because a creative cannot be afraid for these kind of things. It's up to us to embrace it and let's go to where history takes us. It's quite simple.
I think one of your qualities, as I may say, is that you give a lot of your knowledge and your experience, you give it back to the new generation. I think you have a big responsibility to educate. If you look at these new generation designers, do you think they are doing well? Do you think they are going into the direction that we used to do?
I'm not sure. I don't even know if this is relevant or not. Maybe I'm also like an older guy, and maybe the younger generation is more aware and more ready for this revolution. I mean, that's what I assume. But I think what I know about this younger generation, that is, they tend to be very pragmatic. And what we can bring in is maybe the bigger ideas and the ideologies, but also like the references. So in my opinion, you need to have a good understanding of philosophy, for example, human sciences, but also about art history. I talk a lot about art history. I always talk about references. You need to be referential. And sometimes I notice that this younger generation is a bit too pragmatic. So they're too much focused on the execution of design. And you cannot do that without a deep understanding of certain philosophers, of what happens in society. Well, you mentioned trust. I mean, that's already like a philosophical phenomenon that you need to understand. But also you need to know all what happened in the past.
But I think that's a very interesting part of the creative industry. There are a lot of roles which didn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah, and maybe some roles like maybe the user experience designer or the UI designer. All these roles will disappear quite soon.
And
I wouldn't be surprised.
Changed by new kind of roles.
Like maybe a choreographer or an architect, or maybe mathematicians. That's I expect these kind of roles.
Is that also the interesting part of our industry, that we just don't know?
Yeah, that is the interesting part, because in my presentations I talk a lot about these godfathers of UX, and they publish a lot, like this Jacob Nielsen. He talks a lot about agentic AI, and the funny thing is that the only thing they talk about is, I mean, the dot on the horizon is very clear. There's no discussion about that. But how do we define the new user interface? We really don't know yet. So we are inventing it. And that is all super interesting. So the only thing that you can do is to embrace technology, not to be scared, just embrace it and experiment with it. And that can be really, sometimes it's very difficult, because 2 days ago I started experimenting. I had like some conceptual ideas, really cool. Then I started together with a few designers, we started to make designs, and it was all very disappointing. So then you end up depressed in bed. But this morning, or yesterday, I came to some new thoughts. I mean, this is the way to go. So there was like some tunnel vision there. And that's the most challenging part, because you always try to relate it to things that happened in the past. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting story, but I also know that you are very much interested in different cultures. You travel a lot. You are every year you are going back to China. What do you see in these differences in design cultures? Is there a different way how designers work in China compared to European countries?
Well, maybe not so different, but innovation is super important. And we need to, as Western Europeans, we need to be aware that the innovation is probably not here, but maybe in Silicon Valley. I think it's still there. It's also in the Middle East. There's some interesting things happening there. And the reason why I traveled a lot in Asia is that you can really feel, you were there too, you can feel that the innovation is everywhere. It's in robotics, but it's also how people are interacting with technology. We can learn from that.
But can you conclude that we're a little bit behind as European countries?
Yeah, but this is the old world. I visited Paris last weekend, and it's still one of my favorite cities. But it's the old world, and we can also learn from that old world, because I went to a museum for medieval art. And then at that point, I realized that craftsmanship is super important. And I'm even thinking about, I'm working on the creative direction plan these weeks before Christmas. I need to deliver that. So I think craftsmanship will be a crucial part of that creative plan for next year. That's for a reason. But at the same time, we need to embrace innovation. And innovation is not in this part of the world. So we need to broaden our view.
And look at different countries like?
Yeah, it's not only in AI, robotics, because that's what you can see. You can feel it everywhere. If you walk on the street in China, you feel the influencer culture, and but also robotics, and you feel that it's more like a tech society. By the way, closer in Poland is also like an emerging economy. You can also feel it there. So you need, I think we are a bit like narrowing our point of views. It's too much Western focused, and it's very important that I'm a big promoter of globalism in that sense, because it's inspiring you. And the only mission we have as creatives is to identify the creative potential of emerging technologies. So if you are not surrounded by these technologies, if you are not surrounded by these innovations, then it's very difficult to define or to identify the creative potential. So you need to be at the center of where all the innovations happen. Yeah.
Henk, last question. Can you bring us a little bit to your keynote at UX Rotterdam? What can we expect?
There are some bold statements in this keynote. It's about the future of UX, of course. It's about two paradigms, the user and the interface, that will most probably disappear very soon. But that's the bold statements part, and I think all the audience is already aware of that. I also want to make it very tangible. So what I want to do is to share the experiments and the prototypes and the proof of concepts that we are working on, because AI is literally involved in all the projects we are currently working on. So I want to share that to make it really tangible. I also want to share references and ideas about that. It's very important to be referential. You need to know your references as a designer. So I will talk a little bit about a cultural context. So I will talk about futurism, for example, an art movement, but also about the arts and crafts movement, because that relates to the challenges we are dealing with and how we can probably solve it. I also will talk about the required mindset. So we already discussed open-mindedness and embracing innovation. Let's go where history takes us. So because that's quite interesting about this old man, Jacob Nielsen, he talks a lot about you need to reinvent yourself, otherwise you will not survive as a designer. So we have like 2 or 3 or 4 years now to recalibrate, to reinvent our careers. So I want to provide tools for that. So yeah.
Sounds really exciting, Henk. I'm really looking forward to it. So I will personally sit in the audience and listen to your keynote.
Yeah, probably. I already have my keynote ready, but I'm also sure that within these, let's say, 4 months, I will probably adjust a lot because it's still like pioneering. We are taking the first steps, and I also come to new insights.
Let's surprise us, Henk. Yeah. I'm confident in a really interesting and inspirational story. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I think it was a really interesting conversation, and I learned a lot from your insights. So I'm looking forward to April 2026. And to the listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast UX Rotterdam. If you want to know more about speakers and about Henk, go to uxrotterdam.com. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. See you at the next episode.